It took 9 months after the Federal Reserve Board dropped its interest rates dramatically for Franklin D. Roosevelt to shut down the commercial banks completely. That was the end of it. Overnight, your life was decimated. Are you aware of that? That happened, and people call me a conspiracy theorist. That never happened. March 6, 1933, at the stroke of midnight, commercial banks were shut. And you know what they called it? Remember the pretty little name they gave that little episode? They called it a bank holiday. Get a break. Have a break from getting cash out the bank. Why did they shut the banks? Why did Roosevelt, that was his first act in office, Proclamation 2039, have a look, he shut it down. Did you know a US president had the power to do that? Yes. Franklin D. Roosevelt was the longest serving president in US history. He's the only US president to serve 4 terms. How many terms can US presidents serve now? Constitutionally, the 22nd Amendment of the United States was altered in 1951 to prevent another president doing what Franklin D. Roosevelt did. But Franklin D. Roosevelt had a job to do, and he did it under states of emergency. When you're under a state of emergency, what does that mean? You can make legislation on the fly. You don't need approval, you can just make stuff up. And that's what they did. The Securities Exchange Commission, 1933, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and of course the Glass-Steagall Act, the Banking Act of 1933. This was the destruction of the US economy. But I'm going to get to Fort Knox in a second, because this is important for you to know this. Because after the closure of the commercial banks, it became evident to Roosevelt that the common man still had access to something. He didn't have access to his currency, but he did have access to something else. Gold. Gold was the only asset left in the black after the collapse of Wall Street. Wall Street, by the end of 32, was at 10% of its original value and represented more closely the stock market value of 10 years earlier in 1923. So Roosevelt shut the banks down for about 12 to 15 days. It's actually not really clear how long the banks were closed for. But what this did is it enabled them to watch the common man and his antics, as the common man, especially in the city areas, struggled. To be fair, the only thing you had left was what was under your mattress and what was in your pockets, except if you had gold. Now that was different. But of course the Treasury realised that the common man was still able to survive quite comfortably with gold. In fact, you would have done very well, actually, if you'd been in gold. It was trading at $20.67 an ounce back in those days, a price that had been fixed in the Coinage Act of 1834, 100 years earlier. So the common man was doing just fine until Roosevelt said this has to stop. If we let the common man trade gold, they will become more powerful than the Treasury. Not a good position for the United States government. Not a good position for the Federal Reserve, who was now left printing a currency that nobody wanted. Not only that, they couldn't get at it because they'd closed the commercial banks, which caused the collapse of how many commercial banks? 10,000 commercial banks collapsed. Yeah, that's your life. Gone.